I never thought the man my daughter married would look me in the eyes and say, "You ruined our life." But what broke me wasn't his words. It was what my daughter did next. She didn't defend me. She didn't stop him. She just stood there, silent. And in that silence, I realized something painful. I had already lost my place in my own family. I wasn't always the woman people ignored. Once, I was the center of everything, the one holding the family together with tired hands and a hopeful heart. I became a mother young. Too young, some said, but I didn't have time to be afraid. Life was already moving fast, and my children needed me to keep up. I worked 2 jobs for years, one in the morning, one late into the night. I learned how to stretch a single paycheck into groceries, school shoes, and birthday cakes that weren't fancy but were made with love. Their father left early. No goodbye, no explanation, just a quiet absence that forced me to be both parents overnight. I told myself I was strong, but the truth is I was just doing what needed to be done. I missed weddings, I missed sleep, I missed youth, but I never missed a school play, a doctor's appointment, or a night when my daughter cried herself to sleep. She was my soft spot, my youngest, the one who used to hold my hand too tight when crossing the street. I remember brushing her hair before school, telling her, "Never let anyone make you feel small." Funny how life repeats lessons we once taught. When she grew up, I thought the hardest part was over. I thought I had done my job. Then she met him. At first, he seemed polite, respectful, the kind of man who smiled just enough to appear kind. He shook my hand firmly and called me ma'am. I ignored the tight feeling in my chest. Mothers often do. After they married, things changed slowly, so slowly that I blamed myself for noticing. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became rare. When I came over, conversations stopped when I entered the room. I told myself, "They're busy. This is normal." Then came the comments, small ones at first. "You should rest more. Things are different now. We like our privacy." Each sentence pushed me a little further outside the circle I once stood in. Still, I stayed quiet. I had been quiet my whole life for my children, until the night he finally said it out loud. The night he told me I had ruined their life. And the moment my daughter showed me exactly where I stood. I still remember how quiet the room became after he said it. "You ruined our life." The words didn't come out angry. That's what scared me the most. They came out calm, measured, like he had rehearsed them. I felt something heavy press against my chest, the kind of feeling you get when you realize the ground beneath you isn't solid anymore. I looked at him, waiting for a laugh, a joke, anything to tell me I had misheard. But his face didn't change. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as if he had finally said something he'd been holding inside for years. I turned toward my daughter. She was standing near the kitchen counter, fingers wrapped tightly around her phone. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. She didn't look at me. That's when fear crept in. Not fear of him, fear of the silence. I said her name softly at first, the way I used to when she was little and scared. "Say something," I whispered. She swallowed hard. Still nothing. That was when he stood up. "I think it's time we're honest," he said. "You're always here, always involved, always needing something." I felt my heart start to pound. "I don't need anything," I replied. "I just wanted to see my daughter." He scoffed. "That's the problem," he said. "You don't see it. You don't see how you affect us." I looked at my daughter again. "Is this how you feel too?" I asked. Her silence stretched longer than it should have. Then she nodded. Just once. That nod hurt more than his words. I felt my knees weaken, so I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "I raised you," I said, my voice shaking. "Everything I did was for you." "I know," she said quietly, "but things are different now." Different. That word echoed in my head. Different how? Different because she had a husband now? Different because I no longer fit into the picture they were building? He stepped closer. "You don't belong here anymore," he said. "You bring negativity. You remind her of a past we're trying to move on from." I stared at him. A past? That past was me. The sacrifices. The nights I stayed awake. The meals I skipped so she could eat. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked one simple question. "Do you want me to leave?" I didn't look at him when I asked it. I looked at my daughter. Her eyes filled with tears. But she didn't say no, she hesitated. Then said, "Maybe it would be best if you gave us some space. Space. Such a gentle word for something so brutal. He smiled faintly, like a man who had finally won an argument. I felt heat rise to my face. So this is it? I asked. After everything? He sighed dramatically. You're overreacting, he said. We just want our life back. I nodded slowly. Inside, something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. The kind of break that doesn't heal easily. I walked toward the door, every step heavier than the last. Before I left, I turned around one last time. I hope one day, I said, you realize what you're asking me to give up. My daughter finally looked at me then, but by that time, it was too late. I walked out without another word, and as the door closed behind me, I realized something terrifying. That wasn't just a conversation, that was a goodbye. I didn't cry when I stepped outside. Not at first. The night air felt colder than it should have been. Or maybe it was just me. My hands were shaking as I reached my car, but I don't remember unlocking it. I only remember sitting there, staring at the steering wheel, wondering how a place that once felt like home could suddenly feel like enemy territory. I waited. I don't know why. Maybe I expected my daughter to come running after me. Maybe I hoped she would open the door and say, "Mom, wait." We didn't mean it, but the door stayed closed. The lights inside stayed on. Life continued without me. That's when the tears came. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet ones that blurred my vision and made it hard to breathe. I drove home slowly, afraid that if I went too fast, something inside me would completely fall apart. When I reached my apartment, the silence hit me harder than the cold had. No voices, no footsteps, no familiar laughter, just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a clock I suddenly hated. I took off my coat and placed it on the chair, the same chair my daughter used to sit in when she visited. The memory made my chest tighten. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. For a long time, I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to feel. All I knew was that something essential had been taken from me, something I had built my entire life around. Family. That night, sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. You ruined our life. I replayed the moment over and over, searching for something I might have said or done differently. Some word, some gesture, anything that could have changed the ending. But no matter how many times I replayed it, the result was always the same. I was unwanted. The next morning, I woke up exhausted, like I had been fighting a war in my sleep. I reached for my phone. No missed calls, no messages. I told myself not to check, but I did anyway. Still nothing. I thought about calling my daughter. My finger hovered over her name. I stared at her photo, the same smile she used to give me when she was little. Then I remembered her silence, and I put the phone down. Days passed like that. Quiet, heavy, slow. I stopped cooking real meals. Toast became dinner. Coffee became breakfast. Sometimes nothing became both. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not my friends. Not my neighbors. I was ashamed. Ashamed that I had given everything and still been pushed aside. I started avoiding mirrors. The woman staring back at me looked older than I remembered. Her eyes were tired. Her shoulders slumped. She looked like someone who had been erased little by little. One afternoon, I finally decided to go outside. Just a walk. Nothing more. As I passed families laughing together, children holding their parents' hands, something inside me cracked again. That was supposed to be my future. Instead, I had silence. I tried to distract myself. I cleaned. I reorganized. I threw away old things I didn't need. But then I found a box. Photos, birthdays, holidays, smiles, proof that I had once belonged somewhere. I sat on the floor, surrounded by memories, and cried harder than I had in years. That was the moment I realized the truth. I wasn't just grieving a fight. I was grieving a family that was still alive, but gone. That realization changed something inside me. The sadness was still there, but now, there was something else too. A question. If they could walk away from me so easily, what was I supposed to do now? I didn't have an answer yet, but deep inside, something had started to shift, and that shift was going to change everything. There comes a moment when pain stops screaming. It gets quiet. That's the most dangerous part. Days had turned into weeks, and still, my phone stayed silent. No calls, no messages, no accidental check-ins, nothing. At first, I told myself they were just busy. Then I told myself they needed time. Eventually, I stopped telling myself anything at all. One morning, I woke up and realized something terrifying. I hadn't thought about calling my daughter the night before. Not because I didn't care, but because something inside me was too tired to hope. That's when I knew I was reaching my breaking point. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of cold coffee, and suddenly felt overwhelmed by a thought I had been avoiding. What if this isn't temporary? What if this is permanent? The idea made my chest ache. I had always believed that no matter what happened, family would come back. That blood meant something unbreakable. But now, I wasn't so sure. I tried one last time. I called her. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I just hung up and stared at my phone, waiting for it to ring back. It never did. That was the moment something inside me finally gave way. Not in anger, in acceptance. I realized I had been standing outside a closed door, knocking softly, hoping someone would open it. But the truth was painful and clear. They had locked it on purpose. That night, I cried harder than I had since the day I left their house. Not because I missed them, but because I finally understood that I was alone in this. And then, something unexpected happened. The tears stopped. I felt empty. But in that emptiness, there was clarity. I asked myself a question I had never asked before. What if I stopped chasing people who don't want me? The idea scared me. My entire identity had been built around being needed, being useful, being there. If I wasn't a mother constantly sacrificing, who was I? The next morning, I did something small but powerful. I didn't check my phone. I made myself breakfast, a real one. Eggs, toast, fruit. I ate slowly. I cleaned my apartment and opened the windows, letting fresh air in like I was inviting life back inside. Then I sat down and wrote something on a piece of paper. Not a letter to them, a promise to myself. I will not beg to be loved. Seeing the words in my own handwriting made them real. That afternoon, I walked to a nearby park. I sat on a bench and watched people pass by, strangers with their own lives, their own pain, their own stories. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. I felt present. I started doing things quietly, without announcement. I joined a small community class. I spoke to people who didn't know my past. I slept better, and slowly, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Strength. Not loud strength, quiet strength. The kind that grows when you stop expecting rescue. One evening, as I was folding laundry, my phone buzzed. A message from my daughter. 3 simple words. Are you okay? I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands didn't shake this time. My heart didn't race. I realized something shocking. I wasn't desperate for a reply anymore. I typed back carefully. Yes, I am. And for the first time since everything had fallen apart, that wasn't a lie. I thought choosing myself would bring peace. I didn't know it would also bring consequences. Because the moment I stopped reaching out was the moment everything began to change. I didn't expect anything after that message. No apology. No explanation. No miracle. I had already made peace with silence. But life has a strange way of testing your strength after you think you've healed. 2 weeks later, there was a knock on my door. Not loud. Not confident. Hesitant. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. It was my daughter. She looked thinner, tired. Her eyes were swollen, like she hadn't slept in days. And behind her stood my son-in-law, the same man who once told me I had ruined their life. He wouldn't meet my eyes. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my daughter broke. She started crying, not softly, not politely, but the kind of crying that comes from holding pain in for too long. I should have listened to you, she whispered. Those words hit harder than any insult ever could. She stepped inside and sat down like she used to when she was a child, curling into herself, suddenly small again. Then the truth came out. The arguments, the financial mess, the lies she had ignored to protect her marriage, the pressure he had put on her to cut people off, to choose sides, to stay silent. And finally, the separation. My son-in-law spoke only once. I was wrong, he said quietly. I blamed you because it was easier than facing myself. There it was. The karma. Not loud, not dramatic. Just truth finally standing in the room. I didn't feel victory. I felt clarity. I looked at my daughter and realized something important. I could love her without destroying myself again. I'm here, I said, but things can't go back to how they were. She nodded. She understood. Because she had finally learned what it cost to lose someone who loved you quietly. Over the next months, we rebuilt slowly, with boundaries, with honesty, with space to breathe. I didn't move back in. I didn't rescue. I didn't sacrifice my peace. And something beautiful happened. She started respecting me. Not because I demanded it, but because I finally respected myself. One afternoon, she hugged me before leaving and said, "You're stronger than I ever realized." I smiled. Because the truth was, I hadn't always been strong. I had been broken, but I chose to heal instead of harden. If you're watching this and you've ever been abandoned by the people you gave everything to, hear me clearly. Walking away doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes, it means you finally chose yourself. If this story touched you, if you've lived it, or you're living it right now, subscribe to this channel. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs strength today. Because healing stories deserve to be heard. And sometimes, they change lives.